Hi, my name is Princess Zelda, CEO of Triforce Airlines, and I'd like to present to you an exciting future.
Hyrule's doors open to the world. Tourists flock from far and wide to see our beautiful landscapes, varied wildlife, and current world-ending event, all transported by our fleet of industry-leading aircraft designed and built by our lead engineer Link. Triforce Airlines hopes to give you a warm welcome with our brilliant customer service very soon. The only question is, where do we put the airport?
Well, there's a few options, and all of them are fucking awful.
Let's start with the basics. For an airport, we're going to need an area which is flat and has space. In order to take off and land, aeroplanes need a runway, and this is what's going to be taking up the most space, and it's what this video is basically about. Where can we fit a runway on this map? Now, Haneda Airport in Japan has a 3,300 meter runway. London Heathrow, 3,900. Denver, USA has a 4,900 meter runway. And an evil green terminal for some reason. If I were to draw a 4,900 meter line on the Tears of the Kingdom map, it would look like this. That's like half the map. Oh, and by the way, I'm going off the in-game coordinate system where each unit is 1 meter, which makes sense when looking at this minigame, which measures in M, lines up with the coordinates, and I don't think it stands for miles. Luckily for us, a runway this long is kind of unnecessary. The way things work is that the heavier a plane is, the longer it needs in order to reach the speed to take off, and the longer it needs to slow it down upon landing. As a result of this, the passenger planes with the longest runway requirement is the Boeing 747 family of planes. They need around 3,200 meters. So that makes things a little easier. It's still a big line. We'd probably still have to level a mountain to fit this anywhere. But the thing is, Hyrule probably wouldn't need to service the 747 or the A380 or any of these huge planes that could seat hundreds of passengers because Hyrule is tiny. If you go to all the major settlements, you'll see that there really isn't a lot of people. In fact, I'd estimate that the population of Hyrule is probably only like 300 or so. If we chucked all of them onto an A380, it wouldn't even reach half capacity. So the population is low, but also there really isn't much space for tourists, so we wouldn't be able to welcome a fully loaded 747. All this to say, we can definitely cope with a smaller runway that services smaller planes. So what's the smallest commercial runway out there? Well, that'd be the classic Juancho E. Erushkin Airport on the island of Saba in the Caribbean. It is just 400 meters long, which is so much more doable. Unfortunately, it's so small that it can only really service planes that look like this, which is just about big enough for the pilot, the in-flight safety manual, and the free bag of little pretzels that they give you, but only if the pilot eats the pretzels before they put the manual in. Or vice versa, I don't really care. This is less of a plane and more of an outfit. So no, this is not really what we want. Looks like we'll be going for somewhere in the middle, and for this I've picked out 2 planes that I'll be looking to service in our airport. The Airbus A220-100. It's a relatively new and high-tech plane, which is good for Triforce Airlines, paints us as hip and trendy. Bad for budget though, just one of these will set us back 80 million rupees. It can fit around 130 passengers and, more importantly, it's made by Airbus so the door shouldn't fall off mid-flight. It has a minimum runway requirement of 1,500 meters, which is reasonable. Honestly, while this plane is one of the smallest of the Airbus and Boeing fleet, it could still be considered a bit too big for Hyrule, which is why I picked out 2 planes. Here's the second one. The ATR 42-600. Now, if you're a bit of an aviation geek, you'll know that what I'm showing you right now is not the ATR. This is the ATR. The reason I'm showing you this plane is because if I want to buy the ATR in Microsoft Flight Simulator, it'll cost me 200 quid, so I do apologise. It only seats around 50 passengers, but that should still be enough. It's only 20 million rupees, and better than that, it only needs a runway of 1,100 meters. So we've picked our planes, 1,100 meters of space minimum, 1,500 if possible. With that, let's look at the first possible location. Welcome to Gerudo Desert Airport. Now, if you're playing along at home, Gerudo Desert was probably one of the first places you thought of because it kind of stands out on the Tears of the Kingdom map as being big and pretty flat. There's enough space to fit our 1,500 meters, meaning that we can service both planes. In fact, there's even space for a 2,500 meter runway if we so desired, but there's a reason we don't desire this, and I'll explain that in a bit. Obviously, it's not completely flat, there's still some sand dunes we'd need to level out, but comparative to other areas of the map, this would need very little terraforming. It's not like we're trying to build a runway through a mountain that we'd have to get rid of. You may be a little worried about the stability of whatever we build here, like, Princess Zelda, you obviously haven't read the Bible. If you had, you would remember Matthew 7:24, where it says, "And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand." Now, I'd like to think Matthew's somewhere in heaven right now on a strict humble pie diet, because nowadays, many buildings have been built on sand and are yet to fall, thanks to people with qualifications realizing that Matthew probably wasn't a structural engineer. Anyway, yeah, building on sand isn't much of a problem. Look at somewhere like Dubai. That city used to be a desert, and now it's got all these skyscrapers and the second busiest airport in the world. Wow, this spot seems perfect. Did we hit the jackpot straight away or something? This place has a big problem. Link is so hot that he's taking damage. And this is Link being hurt. He's like a deity. I can't imagine the average bloke taking a flight has more than 2 hearts. He'll be dead in 40 seconds. Tears of the Kingdom actually tells us just how hot it is when you look at the map. 54 degrees Celsius. That's 129 Fahrenheit. That ties the hottest recorded temperature on Earth in the last 100 years. And it's like this every day from the hours of 9 AM to 4 PM. And what's crazy is that at night, it gets really cold. -6 Celsius, 21 Fahrenheit, not as extreme as the heat, but still really bad. Here's the temperatures I measured at different times of the day. If we wanted to land here, we'd really need to be operating between the hours of 5 and 8 AM or PM. Which is possible, but, you know, what if a flight is delayed? What if a nearby plane has an emergency and needs to divert to Gerudo Desert Airport and it's midday? They'd probably be safer in the air with their engine failure and lack of door than down here. You may think, well, yeah, it's going to be hot, but just make sure there's air-conditioned transport to the terminal building, and, you know, yeah, Link could probably knock something up, it'd probably kill you. But it's not just the temperature that's bad here, it's the weather too. This place gets frequent sandstorms which render radars completely inoperable and massively affect visibility. And those are like the 2 biggest things that a pilot needs in order to land, apart from like wheels. All of a sudden, this place doesn't seem too good. Don't worry, I'm not done. It gets worse. Obviously, in order to land a plane, we need space on the ground for a runway, but we also need space in the air. When an aeroplane comes into land, it doesn't look like this. What it actually looks like is this. They typically approach at an angle of 3 degrees. It means that the area surrounding a runway needs to be pretty flat as well. Taking off and landing from this direction would be fine because beyond here is the ocean and this mountain ends before it intersects with the flight path. This side, less fine. There's this mountain here. It's hard to measure how tall it is because you can't actually get there in-game, but measuring an area which seems to be similar in height gives us 370 meters above sea level. The desert itself is roughly 40 meters above sea level, meaning any flight landing in this direction would need to drop 330 meters in the space of about 1400, which would be an angle of 13 degrees, which is not ideal. It's probably possible in a life and death scenario, but not for a routine flight. This is also why we're not making the runway the maximum 2500 meters, because then the angle would be even more extreme. So there's 2 options here. Option 1, all flights take off and land in the same direction. This could happen. There wouldn't be enough flights per day to make a collision possible, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. What we would have to worry about, though, is a go-around. This is essentially an aborted landing. If the pilot thinks there's a problem or the plane gets hit by a wind shear, they will initiate a go-around and the plane will essentially take off again and go around to try landing again. If it did a go-around of 15 degrees, which is a fairly average takeoff angle, then the plane would clear the mountain by just 30 meters. The other option would be to completely level the mountain, which would be rather expensive. Neither is very good. Should say as well that there does exist an airport where there is no go-around procedure due to dangerous terrain, such as the Courchevel Airport in France. So I guess we could just implement that here, though it's not ideal and probably not the kind of thing we should be implementing on a runway that services these big commercial aircraft. And when I tell you this is one of the best airport options we've got, I mean it. Shame because there's quite a lot of space for the actual terminal building, which will be very small. I can't imagine we'd be doing more than 1 flight per day because of how small and unpopulous Hyrule is. I think it's back to the drawing board. Let's have a look at the next one. This one is situated on the top of Mount Agat, fairly close to the last airport we looked at. There's only enough space for a 1300 meter runway, so we'll only be looking at the ATR. Now the reason I picked out this part is because, well, it's flat. Obviously not completely flat, there will still need to be a significant amount of leveling, but far less than other areas on the map. But I also picked it because it solves the problem we had at the end of the last airport, being the terrain in the way of the flight path and not wanting our plane to crash. The mountain is in such a good position because it is the terrain in the way. It's one of the highest points on the map, so there's no worries about hitting something either side. Taking off and landing should be more than possible in either direction, which is great because sometimes the day's weather, like the wind, favours a certain direction, so in the interest of safety, this is good. Probably, you know, rather scary to land at. There's worry about the plane falling off the runway, but you know, that's up to the pilot. Awesome. Great. This one seems pretty good. 5 problems. Number 1, we'd have to build the terminal building elsewhere because there's not enough space up on the mountain. It would likely be down here, about 150 meters below the runway, which begs the question how our passengers will get up to the runway, and I think it would probably be a big set of stairs, which isn't amazing. You also may be wondering how the plane that lands is going to taxi to the terminal building, and well, it probably won't, unless it goes down the stairs. Theoretically, we can have the passengers board and disembark on the runway. I don't think there'd be an issue with this because, again, small airport, probably only 1 flight per day. Just make sure that the flight that lands takes off before the next one lands. The air traffic control tower would also be down here, and in order to get a good view of the runway, it would have to be just absurdly tall, about 240 meters tall. This is how it would compare with the world's current tallest ATC tower. That was problem 1, you know, maybe that can be demoted to an inconvenience. Problem 2, you technically can't get here. That's right, if Link climbs up here, he's met with an invisible wall and a message saying he can go no further. What we will definitely have to determine, and as CEO of Triforce Airlines, I promise our passengers that we will get to the bottom of this before opening here. We'll have to determine whether or not this wall is merely theoretical, as a bit of a narrative device to keep Link on track with his goal to save Hyrule, or if there is just an invisible wall here for everyone. To be honest, if that is just an invisible wall for everyone, then it's going to continue all around the border of the world, create a big bowl, and in that case, no plane is landing anywhere. So I think for the sake of the video, we're going to say it's a wall that only affects Link. Even if the wall is just for Link, you know, he's our star pilot. There's no use having our captain physically unable to reach the runway. That's no good at all. The third problem. As you have probably been able to see, this place is snowy and thus rather cold. How cold? Minus 30 Celsius. Minus 22 Fahrenheit. That's significantly lower than the threshold for frostbite. Here's the temperature I sampled at different times of the day. It actually gets warmer if you go further down the mountain. It's only minus 22 at the terminal building. Wow. The plane would be fine because at the typical cruising altitude of 39,000 feet, the outside temperature can get as cold as minus 55 Celsius. But, you know, what about our passengers? What if someone booked accommodation in the Farron region and gets on the plane wearing khaki shorts? They're not going to make it to the Farron region. Once again, Link's an evil genius and can probably provide transport. I don't know if I'd go in this, but, you know, it's up to you. And there are airports around the world that can get this cold, like the Svalbard airport in Norway, so it's potentially bearable. Now, the fourth problem, I'm going to just show you the trailer for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah, the Sky Islands, the bits of land in the sky. This makes things a bit harder. Once again, taking off and landing in this direction would actually be okay because there aren't any islands in the way, but this direction... Now, if our pilots are very talented, they can take a very straight approach, meaning it's only really these two Sky Island clusters that are the problem. This one should be okay because it's very low down and almost at the same height as the mountain, so that should be alright. But this is a real problem. This place is a minefield of flying boats and columns and pillars all at different levels. Look, it's possible to get a plane through, but I don't think our pilots would appreciate having to play hole in the wall every time they come into land. I definitely wouldn't want to be on a plane going through this. Once again, may have to adopt the single direction and no go-around rule. Now, the fifth problem. Obviously, the two planes I picked out vary in size and the amount of passengers they can hold. But what they also vary in is their range, i.e. the distance they can travel on a single fuel load, and they vary a lot. The Airbus can go up to 6,700 kilometers without stopping, which is pretty good. Now theoretically, if Hyrule were located where London is, then you could fly direct via the Airbus from Sao Tome and Principe, the northwest of India, and New York. The ATR's range, on the other hand, is about 5 times less, at 1,300 kilometers. Valencia in Spain is about as far as we could go. And since this runway is only big enough for the ATR, it means the amount of places that can fly direct to Hyrule is way lower, which isn't great for our tourism. You can get connecting flights, but we have no idea what the world looks like outside of Hyrule. You know, what if it was where Tristan da Cunha is on Earth? Then it wouldn't be accessible from anywhere via the ATR. If that's the case, what's the point of our airport? Is that land over there inhabited? Does it connect to a continent? Who knows? All we know is we're playing a dangerous game if we can't make our runway at least 1,500 meters. Honestly, I don't know which one's worse. Sky Islands actually don't have a big impact on this one, by the way, because we can just tell our pilots to avoid this airspace, which, I mean, actually kind of is a big deal, but look, landing anywhere in Hyrule probably going to take extra pilot training. Now, I'll be honest, this next location is a bit of a cheat, so I'm examining it as its own thing because, yeah, it's a bit of a cop-out, but I still think it's worth talking about. Yeah. Beyond the beautiful land of Hyrule lies a bunch of nothing. It's the world border and it's perfect for an airport. It looks pretty flat and it's got plenty of space. We could make the world's largest runway if we wanted. Would be completely unnecessary, but you know, it's cool. Being this far out means we wouldn't be worrying about any sky islands because the planes could just avoid Hyrule as a whole. This airport is, you know, the smart option, but I think it goes against the spirit of the video. And it's not like it would be without issues, the biggest one being, well, it's not actually in Hyrule. All of our passengers land up there, and they want to be down here. And between the two is a massive chasm. We need to build a bridge, and I don't know about you, but this would be terrifying. Walking across Link's rickety fucking bridge he built in 10 minutes out of a bunch of debris, looking at the sheer 1,000-meter drop into nothingness. It'd be awful. It also begs the question, where would be the best place to build the bridge? If we built it here, it would lead our passengers directly into Dyatlov Pass here, and it'd be a bit too close to the forest that kills you. This is the volcano. This is the hottest place in existence. This is the coldest place in existence. The only safe-ish place to build it would be here, so the bridge will have to be about 550 meters long, and since the height of the border appears to be, you know, roughly the same height as the previous airport, the bridge would also be about 550 meters high. That's a 45-degree bridge. Can you imagine if you tripped over? It's a bit steep for any sort of vehicle, so we'd have to make it a staircase, but that wouldn't be very fun either. Can you imagine the only way you could leave your country is by having to do a Roblox stairway to heaven? Jesus Christ, man, you can't even cheat and get a good airport. The biggest problem choosing somewhere for an airport is obviously finding a flat part of land. The Tears of the Kingdom map is big for a game, but in the context of somewhere like Earth, it's tiny, meaning it has to fit all the biomes and interesting geography into a small package, making a very hilly and uneven map. Anywhere on the east side is just not possible. That means we're left with all the extreme weather regions. The only normal climate we could land at is in the center of the map, something like, you know, this maybe. I really don't think this is doable because landing here means the plane has to cross somewhere over Hyrule, and the Sky Islands basically create a big ring around the center. Approaching from any angle would hit something. So we need somewhere on the edge of the map so we can approach from the water or just pray the continent isn't too high. Pretty much all areas would massively endanger our passengers or, even worse, cost us loads of money on stuff like terraforming, you know, leveling a mountain, and then that destroys the environment and could displace one of our 5 settlements. It's like, instead of being able to assess the potential issues around Hyrule and then choose a spot using that information, we have to choose one of the few spots and then delve into why it sucks. It feels like I'm being reactive rather than proactive. It feels like what I've talked about so far could equally answer the question, where is the worst spot for an airport in Hyrule? No, Princess Zelda, the worst airport would be a runway that is 12 meters long, is completely vertical, and it's in the volcano. Yeah, alright, you know what I mean. Alright, this is the last one. I wish I could say I'm saving the best for last, but I'm really not too sure. Well, it's the only flat place left on the map, but even then, if we take a closer look, it's got a bunch of obstacles in the way, bits of fallen Sky Island. These would have to go in order to create our runway. It would not be easy to get rid of them, but it's doable. The stable would also have to go, but we'll make sure to just move it somewhere else. We don't want to get rid of one of our few community areas. But after all that, we'd get a 1600 meter runway with a nice amount of space either side for the terminal building, both planes in operation, plus any smaller ones. It's in a good area which isn't too intrusive to the rest of Hyrule, you know, much like the other options. But it's also another reason why a central Hyrule airport probably wouldn't be great. I just think it'd be a bit invasive. You may be wondering about planes approaching to land from this direction because of the terrain across the chasm here, but I don't actually think this would be a problem. If you're familiar with topographical maps, you'll see that this area is actually much lower than the others, and if we look out from the edge of the proposed runway, you can see it's pretty much level. That side is okay, and the chasm is inconsequential because if you crash into the chasm, you weren't going to make it to the runway anyway. There's actually a bit of a Sky Island dead zone around here, such that a go-around could be possible and potentially landing, though I think it'd just be better to do another one-way operation. You can probably see, again, it's cold, but not as cold. It's -10 Celsius. Would definitely need to wrap up warm, but if we just put the terminal building here, our passengers will be very close to a normal climate by just following the road. Okay, I've done this 3 times now. I've said all the good things about the airport, and then there's been some detail that makes it awful, like, now you die of heat, now you die of cold, now you die of hole. So I'm waiting. What's it going to be here? I'm sitting back in my chair now. I've got my legs up on the desk. What's it going to be? I'm waiting. What's it gonna be? What's it? Is this it? Is this it? Is this like a? Is this the normal airport? Is this all there is? Is that? Princess Zelda, Your Majesty, you obviously seem to be in a little bit of distress. Why don't you get one of your monster hunting crews to kill the dragon? Are you serious? Look at them! They can't even kill a red bokoblin. That's the equivalent of a fucking koala bear. Then why don't you just get... just get Link to kill it? Okay. Well, I did that. And then the moon turned red. It's red! The moon's red! For an awful reason. Because now it's respawned the dragon. Hyrule sucks. Why can't I be the princess of Norway or something? If we, think about a plan for this. Blood Moon happens once a week or so. We'll have to close the airport on that day to kill it. But what if the dragon damages the runway or the terminal? Then we'd have to close for repairs, potentially until the next dragon arrives. Oh man. This was it. This was the one. Well, that's all the airports I've got in me. Which of the 3 do you think is the best? Head over to my community tab to cast your vote. The poll should be up by now. Look, if I had to choose between one of these airports, then it's probably because I'm being held at gunpoint. I've been thinking to myself, just the past few minutes, been thinking to myself, who would even want to go on holiday to Hyrule? Seriously, who would want to come here? It's tiny, it's got the most extreme weather, there's more monsters than there are humans and they come back every week. There's a bunch of holes leading to the center of the earth. A stick of butter costs 12 quid. There's these huge rocks that fall from the sky. I didn't even talk about these. Oh my god. Yeah, they just fall from the sky. They just fall from the sky. Can I interest anyone in a boat?